different discussion in a studio, and that is the appointment of Honorable Raila Odinga, ODM party leader Raila Odinga, to the AU. And we're having this discussion with Professor Israel Kodiaga, who's the Director General for Africa Affairs at the Global Unification. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brenda.
First of all, clarify for us the exact role of Mr. Odinga to the AU.
Thank you very much, Brenda. First and foremost, allow me to also join President Uhuru Kenyatta and other Kenyans of goodwill in the congratulation to congratulate Raila Odinga for his appointment as a high representative at the African Union, specifically in charge of infrastructure, which is comprising of infrastructure, energy, and of course transport and tourism.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now back to your question. It would be better for us to understand the organs of the African Union. And the African Union has about 11 organs. The Assembly, the Executive Committee, the Security Council, and all the rest, even the financial institutions. But Raila Odinga has been appointed to the 11th organ, which is the Commission. That commission comprises of a chairman, deputy chairman, and 8 representatives. These 8 representatives are what would ordinarily be cabinet ministers or cabinet secretaries who are responsible for various dockets. And therefore, there are 8 dockets. There is security, there is gender, women and gender, and all those other dockets. Now, his specific docket is this one, which is called the docket of infrastructure, energy, transport, communication, and tourism. All these form the gamut of the responsibilities that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga will be dealing with. In that specific docket, what is required of him is, one, he will basically be working in collaboration. His job will be the coordination, the operationalization, monitoring of programs and, of course, projects of infrastructure, transport, cross-border transport, tourism, and ICT across the continent, but in collaboration or in coordination with regional economic committees. Every region, the East African region, has the East African Community. Then we have SADC. Then we have the ECOWAS, and we have the Maghreb. So it will be doing this in collaboration with the regional economic committees under special agencies of the African Union.
But as much as you've broken down the mandate of Odinga,
yes,
what challenges do we expect him to face, owing to the fact that there's been a lot of mistrust among African countries?
Even before we go to the challenges, it should be noted that this is the first in this position. This position or this commission was created as a result of the Abuja Treaty, that the African Union decided that they needed to have a specific arm dealing with specific issues which bring the African countries together. So the mistrust was actually dealt with in Abuja. And it is the Abuja Treaty that actually created this particular commission and therefore the respective ministries. Now, as to how the challenges that Right Honorable Raila Odinga will be facing alongside his other colleagues are a myriad. First and foremost, you do realize that infrastructure was ordinarily in the present scenario is done by individual countries. For instance, when Kenya is dealing with the rail infrastructure, the standard gauge railway, you realize there was a big problem between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and even Ethiopia. Each country decided to go it alone. So as a minister or as that a representative who is tasked with the responsibility of looking at infrastructural issues. Now, when countries begin to think about certain forms of infrastructure, there would be need now to rally them together so that, one, when they are maybe dealing with the partners or donors or funders, like in the case of the region, we've had China playing a leading role, then they need to move together. So it is that part of getting the regional economic committees moving together which is the greatest challenge. And of course, most infrastructural development has always been or have always been done within the confines of individual countries' territorial boundaries, which does not make much sense. There is no point of having a railway line from Mombasa to Kisumu or to Malaba and you end it there. Yet you need to you cross to Uganda and go up to Rwanda. So these will be some of the challenges.
Okay.
The other challenge that one would look at is the aspect of funding, because some of these infrastructural programs have to be funded, and it means regional countries must form blocks, bargain together, seek funds from one source, and then with the involvement of the high representative, ensure that now the funds are used correctly.
Okay, but now that he's coming in charge of infrastructure and development within the African continent, what is the current state of projects?
Unfortunately, we still do not have major regional projects to talk about. Most countries have been negotiating with the partners, development partners on infrastructure at individual level, which, like I've just told you, is the weakness. So the current state of projects is that countries up to now have not been moving as a region.
Okay.
And the best example is the case of the SGR in the Kenyan case. Ethiopia the other day did theirs, electric train. Tanzania is putting up another one. Rwanda is also going in, but they are going individually. Okay. So the current state is that in most of the infrastructural programs, we are yet to have regions evolve as blocks who are dealing with a specific infrastructural program that cuts across the entire region.
Okay, let's look at his appointment. And there's been a lot of talks about President Uhuru Kenyatta being behind Odinga's appointment, and it's like the talk started in April this year. So as much as Mr. Odinga has the qualifications, and when he was working in Kenya, he was in charge of roads at some point, energy, was this position competitive?
Well, one thing that I have to tell you is that once an appointment like this has been made, everybody would want to make capital out of it. And I do know for a fact that the African Union, one of the greatest challenges that has been there is the lack of internal integration amongst the respective African countries. And the African Union has been fighting to ensure that nations do not implode after elections. And this is one of the ways of ensuring that a country does not implode after elections, which in the Kenyan case, it is a fact. These were flawed elections, they were rigged elections, and a section of Kenyans up to now believe that the elections were stolen. So it is just in order for the African Union to shop around and find a way of calming the nerves. Remember, it is not only President Uhuru Kenyatta who was involved in this thing. In any case, I do know the president of Tanzania, Magufuli, was very much involved in it. I also do know that Raila's other friend, the president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, was involved in it. Raila's other friend, the president of Ghana, was involved in it. Nigeria was involved in it. I do know about 5 or 6 countries who are directly involved in it, courtesy of Raila's own influence and relationships at the Pan-African level.
In short, Professor Kodiaga, Raila's appointment to the AU as we speak around, it is a political appointment. It wasn't a competitive process.
No, it wasn't. Competitive only to the extent that they shop around, but not to the extent that they will ask people to submit applications and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Now, where President Uhuru comes in is that before such an appointment is made, a call has to be made to President Uhuru, because he's the president of Kenya, and his opinion carries the day.
Okay.
And I am happy to say President Uhuru gave a positive word for Raila Odinga, which to me was a poisoned chalice. It is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Uhuru needs it to tell Kenyans, you see, after my handshake with my brother, great things are now happening. And you saw he said the same in Kakamega the other day. On the other hand, Uhuru also knows, and very well, that Raila is one man who has to be kept busy, because an idle Raila is a very dangerous person. And taking him out there will give Uhuru some relative mental peace for the duration of his stay.
So are you in support of a section of Jubilee members of Parliament supporting Deputy President William Ruto, asking Raila to quit active politics, saying that he needs to focus in developing the continent?
I think that I've watched those people, and to me these are political rookies, and their type of talk is the type of talk we do not need in this country. This country has come from a very, very bitter electioneering period, and we do know clearly where the rain started beating us as a country. And to find a section of people now yapping and talking as if 2022, even if Raila is not there, unless we change the rule of the games, unless we change the way we conduct our elections, Kenyans will keep killing each other. So when you have people who are now saying Raila now should quit active politics, and all of them looking at them, they're all juniors politically. And all they can do is shout. So I would like to tell Kenyans that these are the kind of people we do not need to listen to.
So Professor Kodiaga, Raila's appointment to the AU will not in any way affect his political life?
Apparently, just tying it to what you have just asked me, if you listen to the Ruto faction, they have finally found something to say. For the last few weeks or 1 or 2 months, they have been very much unhappy with the trends and the goings, because they do not know where the handshake is taking Kenyans, and they could see clearly that they were getting derailed. Now that this appointment has been made, they are now cashing on it to tell Raila now go home or stay away. And this is what they told Raila all along. So what I know, it is not going to diminish Raila's role. In any case, they should be more worried. Because one, Raila has now moved to at the continental level, and is getting more influence, is getting more networks, which of course would put him a pedestal higher than all of them or any other person. Never mind that we have also had people at the African Union. Madam Dr. Dlamini Nkosazana Zuma was the chairperson of the African Union, and she went back to contest a presidential election. We have had Xi Jinping, who was also at the African Union, and he went back to contest in his native country. So to assume or imagine that Raila, as a high representative at the African Union, would therefore not be active in the Kenyan politics is just a dream.
Okay, let's talk about the head of state's sentiments. And he said that Kenya stands a chance of benefiting from Raila's appointment. So what sort of benefits do we expect as a country?
Numerous. And those benefits have to do with the roles of the high representative for infrastructure, energy, tourism, and transport. I have talked a lot about the transport when we are talking about the regional blocks coming together in terms of infrastructure. And you know, transport, there's also water, river, and lake transport. These are all encompassed in that one. Then the ICT, we also have the idea of having one, the .Africa platform, protocol, domain. We have issues about cybercrime, which is part of the responsibilities there. We also have the IXT. We also have the idea of having all the service providers operate on a platform which is shared. So by and large, the position promises to bring a lot for Kenya. And the region, and it would be foolhardy for anybody to read only politics and forget about what comes with it. What I expect the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga to do immediately goes in. One, you know, he's going to have two flags. Now he'll be having the Kenyan flag on this side and the African Union flag, which of course good prestige. He will have an office in Nairobi, and he will also have another fully staffed and another office in Addis. Now, those offices are supposed now to coordinate his work. The moment he has an office in Nairobi, we expect that much of the activities which are linked to that docket, charity begins at home. So it would be crazy of Raila to have programs like I had somebody talk about South Africa, taking roads and so on in South Africa when they can be put here. So yes, to the country we have a lot to benefit from it in terms of rallying together resources, rallying together players, and identifying critical areas that require immediate and urgent intervention.
But even as much as you talk about this, let me take you back to the African Union, and you gave us a breakdown of the sort of offices, the layers that are there. But the question has always been the focus of the African Union. The Africans tend to think that it's more of African leaders focusing on their own awarding political leaders instead of focusing on development projects for Africans.
Thank you. A child that takes the genes of the parents. The African Union is a child of the Organization of African Unity. The formation of the Organization of African Unity was basically the dream and the vision of the African founding fathers, Kwame Nkrumah and others. The kind of Africa that Kwame Nkrumah and others envisaged was actually an Africa which would be referred to as the United States of Africa. Unfortunately, given the politics of the moment then, which was, of course, it was the period of the Cold War, much of the activities of the Organization of African Union had to do with the struggle for independence, and of course, they ended up aligning themselves with either of the antagonists in the Cold War era. Later, the Organization of African Unity more or less became an assembly of despots, where African heads of states would assemble and sort of just entertain themselves. Very little was done then because of that. Now the African Union, as we know it, was born on the 9th of September 1999 in the waters of Sirte by one Muammar Gaddafi. And it is then that Gaddafi designed a change of the African agenda. Never mind that the same Gaddafi pulled out of the Organization of African Unity in 1983, which marks his death, citing it as a toothless dog. Now, the idea was to have a dog that can bite. As we speak now, the African Union is busy redeeming its image, and we can say a lot of good things are happening. Because, like you see, the arm that deals with military intervention issues, you can see them in Somalia, AMISOM, and elsewhere. We have the financial institutions, the African Development Bank, all of them working. We have got the NEPAD. We have all these other commissions working, and they're really working well. So I am sure they're redeeming themselves.
Yes.
Thank you.